if you don't see the connection between what you do and what your team does to the greater good of the company, to your point, like it's not just hitting a number of butts and seats, it's what actually ties to the North Star. And I think it goes back to you all need to be paddling in the same direction and making sure. And I use that analogy all the time.
Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today it is my absolute pleasure to have Kerry Curran on with me. She and I are both members of Pavilion, and if I remember correctly, that's how we met. And recently I was on her podcast, and today she's on Thoughts on Selling. Kerry, first question. Who is Kerry Curran?
Well, hi, Lee. Thank you for having me. And again, it's a pleasure to join on your podcast and always fun to be on the other side of the mic. I am Kerry Curran, and I am a lifetime passionate revenue driver of all businesses. Through my podcast, Revenue Boost and Marketing Podcast, I aim to educate executives on the importance of marketing to drive revenue growth. But I also, in my other spare time, operate as a go-to-market executive advisor where I identify gaps in the revenue architecture of a go-to-market strategy from marketing to sales to customer success and help B2B brands, especially agencies, fix those weaknesses and gaps to propel their revenue growth.
I love that, Kerry. And one of the reasons I love that is going way back in my experience, I was on the marketing side. And it struck me that traditionally marketing people sit around and talk about big things and nothing happens.
Yep.
And that's a bit of an overstatement, but nothing happens. Mm-hmm. And then you get into the conversation between sales and marketing, and sales says, these leads stink. And marketing says you couldn't sell your way out of a paper bag. And so it's always, in many cases, it's been an adversarial relationship. And when it's not an adversarial relationship, when marketing and sales work in combination or are completely integrated, as I think I heard you discuss, beautiful things can happen. So let's talk a little bit more about that. First, you use the word passion. So why are you passionate about revenue?
So at the end of the day, every business entity, even a nonprofit, exists for some sort of revenue growth, right? And even if you're not purely capitalistic and looking to drive exponential returns, you need to have money coming in to serve your purpose. So that, first and foremost, is so critically important. And I've worked within and with too many businesses that lose track of that North Star. I worked for a large global agency, and more than once I'd have a conversation with a senior executive, in charge of the company's health and growth. And I'd say, what is your goal? And they would say things like, to make our customers happy. And I'm like, well, yes, and how about make our customers happy while making us the most money we can? And the challenge is you fast forward a few years and that business, by example, it has been struggling with revenue retention and growth. So yes, absolutely. You want, if your end user is your customers, who you're serving, very important. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to sustain that if you're not bringing in revenue or fundraising or whatever it is that keeps you going. So that's it in itself. It's that as a core and North Star of the business strategy.
I love that. And I love that for a number of reasons. First, many, many years ago, I think it was Peter Drucker, the well-known management consultant, said, the purpose of a business is to create a customer. It's not to build cool widgets. It's not to collect money. It's to create a customer. And so there's the balance of creating the customers and shitting on them and creating a customer and spending all of your resources supporting them, right? There's something in the middle there. Many, many years ago, in an effort to make their quarterly sales numbers, Western Digital shipped bricks wrapped up in Western Dig packaging. And so they said, yeah, we shipped our quota. We made our numbers. Customers weren't so happy. They couldn't use bricks in place of hard drives. Of course, people are going, what's a brick? What's a hard drive, right? I'm dating myself. There is that balance. And so here's a question. How do we find that balance of being so aggressive, spending all our money on acquisition and not focusing on customer sat and NPS scores and so on?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's an interesting one because in another previous role I was in, they were hyper focused on new logos.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they cared about. And at the end of the day, I would go to the board meetings and they'd say, where are the logos? Where's the pipeline? But then we'd get to the churn rate, and that was just huge. So there was this leaky bucket, but all the, attention was on me and my team to fill that leaking bucket without enough attention to plugging that hole. And so when I learned more about the go-to-market framework that focuses on, first and foremost, who are your most successful customers? Who can you drive the greatest impact for?
Your
And
ICP.
yeah, exactly. And who's your ICP that is most likely to expand year over year, and focus on that expansion and then targeting that customer, that ICP in your marketing and sales. To me, it was like a huge light bulb came on, and I'm like, oh, duh. Like, that makes so much sense because we've heard for years it's harder and costs more to win a customer than it does to retain a customer. But yet, going back to that, like, too many businesses focus on the new logos and not growing their existing customers for revenue growth.
Great. I'm in complete alignment. So I've run sales as a CSO. I've run sales as a CRO. And the CRO has expanded responsibilities and is more in vogue. In fact, I was a CSO back when it was just coming into vogue. The job offer was VP of sales. And I said, no, I want a seat at the table.
Yeah.
When decisions are made. I don't want to be a recipient of those decisions. So, Kerry, you and I just got a $100 million investment from the boutique VC shop down the street. And we've got a team of people. We've got a fabulous product. It's unbelievable. It's stupendous. It's what the market needs. I'm CRO. You're head of go-to-market. What do?
We take the money and we buy a private island and retire.
And thank you for joining Thoughts on Selling. It's been another great episode.
I wish.
Milestones? We don't need those stinking milestones.
Go off the grid so we can't be arrested. So anyway, we don't want to go to prison. So what I'm, first and foremost is, and even what I do for my smaller clients today is, if we haven't already at this point, really audit the whole go-to-market process end to end. I love the winning by design revenue architecture framework where you can
the
really...
bow tie.
The bow tie is the most brilliant thing I've come across since, business school. And identifying, creating those benchmarks, metrics, evaluating the trends to see where are the gaps, the bottlenecks, the gaps, where are we underperforming, that diagnoses of where the problems are. And then from there, invest in strengthening those gaps.
So what are some of the gaps that you typically find when you do that analysis?
So, you mentioned ICP earlier. First and foremost, again, if you're getting $100 million in investment, then I hope you already have your ICP.
Not always.
Yeah.
You know that. You know that, Kerry. Not always. It's anybody with a pulse.
Yeah.
Can you fog a mirror? You're the ICP.
We sell to everyone. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is I've talked to companies that were, maybe not that large, that definitely were like, oh, that's a good question. So first and foremost, identifying, again, the basics. But again, it's because they forget that they're here to make money. So again, identifying who can you drive the greatest impact for, and what are their attributes? Where are they on their revenue growth scale? What's your, product market fit there? And then what I like to do is find out from them why. Why do you like this company? What have they done for you? What's the outcome that they've driven for you? Have they saved you time? Have they helped you drive greater revenue faster? Do they help you reduce headcount? Like, find out what those outcomes are. What is it that they like so much about you? And I do that today with my clients. I do a net promoter score interview real quick, like getting that, scale of 1 to 10, what's your likelihood to recommend them? But then I dig in more about why do they like about them? Why did you choose them when you were evaluating partners? Using that and putting that into the messaging, the content, helping the very targeted content that helps demonstrate why you're the best for solving their problem, taking the outcomes directly from the successful customers and putting that into a narrative. I learned from another friend in the industry that she was running sales and marketing at a startup, and she would take notes during the sales call of the pain points that the prospect was mentioning and make notes in her to-do list to then go add that as content on the website. So the more she learned about the pain points they were solving, the more she was able to demonstrate and speak to those in their content. So the more you can do that and really get the customer and surveys, questionnaires, or other interviewing, prospects, just getting to that information so you can really target and customize how you're talking to them, what you're saying, and where you're saying it. It's such an important part of getting the right CP, the right qualified, if you want to say MQLs or SQLs, whatever, into your pipeline. And then working with sales to make sure that messaging is carried through. And, we talked about metrics. I think a lot of that is qualitative, but you can put a quantitative spin to it by looking at those conversion rates from MQL to SQL to win rate and diagnose from there. I've done a lot of coaching of sales teams on just other things of shortening the sales cycle, increasing the win rate. I know that's part of your area of expertise as well.
Our area.
Yes, our area. But then the other big part, going back to the bow tie, is the onboarding. And so making sure that you have a team and a real process in that onboarding. I looked up the stat, and I think it was like over 50% of companies say that they make that decision if they're going to renew 12 months later based on those first 30 days. So the onboarding is so critically important. One of the partners I've worked with, they have a dedicated team for onboarding. And part of that is training their new customers on everything to better understand what they're recommending and to better, implement on their end what needs to be implemented so that they're setting their customers up for success and then transferring it to their account manager. So the $100 million investment, really is first looking at where the gaps are and investing and fixing those so that we can drive that scaled, sustainable lifetime value growth.
I love that you started with the customer. It's the customer's perspective on the value that is the only thing that matters, right? What you and I and Charlie and Sally, the founders, think about when we're sitting in the conference room coming up with stuff, that doesn't matter. What matters is the customer perception and the customer's experience. I also love that you didn't just leave that messaging in marketing.
Yeah.
Which I've seen happen. Mm-hmm. That messaging has to get into the hands of the salespeople so they can tell this story. Nobody buys from fact sheets. Nobody buys from product demos. Oh, by the way, stop doing demos. Nobody buys from demos.
Yeah.
People buy from people, and people buy based on stories. Here's what happens with other customers. Here was the situation they were in. Here's the action we took. Here were their results. I also love that you mentioned the onboarding piece because in so many cases, it's that first 30-day experience that is make or break for the rest of the relationship. And that's absolutely critical. When I was at Oracle in key account planning sessions or even in a regular account planning session, I would take my education rep and stick him in the front of the room and tell the rest of the team, all of whom had product quotas, I would say, you need to bundle Don's education services into your proposals, into your quotes, into your deals, because it's not going to cost a dime more for the customer. They won't notice that incremental cost, and they will be more proficient at using your product, which means come renewal time, they are more likely to renew. Now, I know none of you care about renewals a year or 3 years out, and you will a year or 3 years out. Funny story. Yesterday, my son told me he was talking with a CRM company. I won't mention the name. It was HubSpot. He's involved in an early stage company, and right now they're keeping track of leads on a Google Sheet, which the technical term for that is suboptimal. So yes. He has experience with HubSpot. He went to HubSpot and he said, I've got a handful of seats I need to provision, need a quote. The rep came back and said, here's the quote. And by the way, you're an early stage company. If you need us to reduce the cost at all, we can take out the onboarding portion. My son goes, are you freaking kidding me? Yeah. That's the most important part.
And it's so interesting that that was their concession, right? There should be other angles first.
I'm a huge believer in education. Mm-hmm. We have to teach the customer how to use our product. And here's a simple example. two simple examples. Many, many years ago, we took a family trip to California. We arrived at the San Francisco airport. We got put into a new Audi Q7, and it took me 20 minutes to figure out how to use the MMI system to turn off the air conditioning. It was on high. This thing's blowing in my face, and I'd never used an MMI system before. And I'm sitting there playing with it going, how does this turn off? A second example, same airport. 15 years later, I rent a Porsche Boxster. I get in. Where's the ignition switch? The ignition switch is not where you think it is. It's on the left side. Now, I knew that because I know Porsches, but my guess is probably 9 out of 10 people that say, I'm going to rent a Boxster on a lark, they're going to spend 10 minutes looking for that ignition switch. And that's the initial brand experience. You know, we have this initial brand experience when we first open up the product or use the product. Many, many years ago, Apple was very savvy in that they studied the out-of-box experience. How can we make it easier for the customer to unbox the new product and start using it? Many organizations tend to believe, well, our product is the best. It sells itself. We don't need to help customers figure out how to use it. And they're not always right. So that's a great intro to what we'll do together. What's the next step? How do we ensure that the go-to-market engine is running smoothly, and that we're getting the optimal conversion rates, that we continue to get that growth that we want, particularly in the face of, we've got some ankle-biting competition. We've got some other stuff. We've got business as usual as the primary competitor. Yep. By the way, note to everybody listening, your competition is business as usual. It's no decision. Closed loss, no decision.
Yep.
That is the most likely outcome of any of your engagements. How do we get past that? Let's go right to that. How do we get past the closed, no decision?
Yeah, it starts at branding. And again, that's something that's going back to why I started my podcast is too many business leaders think that branding is fluff. Like I've told this story before, the chairman of the PE company board for the company I worked with most recently said to me, stop doing that marketing and focus on the pipeline, that branding stuff. We don't need that.
And every seller in the organization said, oi, there goes my air cover.
The challenge is when I started there, their differentiator were the oldest and the biggest. I'm like, that's actually a deterrent, not an attribute. So when you think about, to your point, your competition, whether it's no decision or the shinier object that's making more noise in the market, you need to make sure that first of all, your true differentiator, and it doesn't have to be unique in that you're the only one that does it, but it has to be in a way that you're demonstrating we can impact your life, your whatever it is. Again, going back to, is it speed? Is it decreased cost? Is it, faster leads, lead volume, whatever the pain point is that you are solving. Make sure that you're demonstrating that you are the best partner for that ICP. To your point, like we don't sell to everyone. If you are in this business category, we know you better than anyone and we solve your challenges better than anyone. And you bring that to market over and over and over in many different ways so that your existing customers don't get a wandering eye, but then your prospects, as they're researching and trying to decide who to add to their shortlist, they're finding you and you're building trust through that messaging and content. So that, first and foremost, is, I think, the most important part of that breaking through the competition of either indecision or actual competitors and bringing that all the way through. I think another part of that is making sure you are messaging that to your existing customers and bringing that, not only reminding them that you are the best at what you do, but also demonstrating other ways you can help them. So too often the account managers are not sellers and don't want to be salesy. So they're afraid to mention other product extensions, features, add-ons. And I've seen that. I've been told that, as the salesperson, we need your team to come in because our team doesn't like to sell. And I was asking a go-to-market expert on his advice on that. And he said they need to remember that the good account managers are strategic partners and consultants to your clients and customers. And as part of being a strategic partner, you want to make sure that you're demonstrating these are other ways we can help you. We understand your business. These are other ways that we can help you. We're not trying to nickel and dime you, but we wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we didn't make sure you were aware of the other options we have for you. So it's getting that, again, positioning as the partner, we're trusted, authority that's here to truly help. That's the other way to keep your customers from that wandering eye of your competition to your competition.
Yeah, that's great advice. So many technology companies lead with, we're different, we're better, we're unique. Customer doesn't give a shit. Customer only cares about meeting their milestones, meeting their quarterly business goals, receiving their MBOs, right? Getting their promotions. They don't care if you're different. They don't care if you're unique. What's the relevance to their goals? And so, in the technology world, there's so many organizations that don't lead with that we can help you achieve your goals, but look at the shiny object. And so, yeah, there's a market for shiny objects. It's not nearly as large as the market for helping you to achieve your business goals. That's thing one. I love that. That gets back to my focus on value selling, of understanding the customer and their business and understanding their customers, right? If I'm calling on a hospital, I'm going to use one phrase. I don't care what I'm selling. I don't care who I'm talking to. I'm going to be talking about patient outcomes, right? Because that's what they ultimately care about. Big picture, that's what the board cares about. Of course, they want to stay in business. Of course, they want to run profitably, but patient outcomes is what drives that. And then underneath that, it might be staff satisfaction, lack of turnover, supplies, et cetera. But it's patient outcomes. And if I come in going, I've got this unique widget, not relevant. What if it solves 95% of all surgical errors? Not relevant until I make it relevant to patient outcomes. Salespeople want to have that conversation. Those are easy conversations to have in comparison to version 3.2 has the following 147 feature enhancements. Let me see if I can remember any of them, right? Salespeople should be natural storytellers. They should be relatable. They should be engaging with their customers on their care-abouts. I use the phrase language of value. Talk with a customer in the language that they are familiar with, whether it's performance or business benefit or cost reductions, but it's not all three of those, it's one. And so salespeople say, so how do you find out someone's language of value or an organization's language of value? Well, one, listen, they'll tell you. Two, you can see it in how they describe the world. You can see it on LinkedIn profiles of the references they give. Charlie is a great team leader. He takes good care of his team. Sally is focused on performance. She gets the optimal performance from any situation, right? So that language is right there. And if I'm talking cost to someone that cares about performance, close, no decision. It's that simple. How do you make sure that the sales leaders are in sync with the messaging, the research that you've done, the customer feedback that you've gathered, right? Because sales leaders sometimes have points of view of their own.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it goes back to the importance of having collaboration and a communication loop with sales and interviewing your sales team who are on the front line of those prospect discovery calls, hearing what the pain points are and sitting in on and listening to or getting the call recordings afterwards and making them part of the process in getting that customer language and getting the narrative right to what they're hearing, and then helping them with their narrative to improve what they're saying in response to those challenges or pain points. So in a way that resonates more strongly with the prospect. And so demonstrating it as a collaboration there. And I know that's not always the case in every organization. And, you said that early on is that sales and marketing don't always see eye to eye. Sales and customer success don't. But that's where we all need to be grown-ups and communicate. I took over a sales and marketing team. They were siloed. And my first conversation, head of sales told me that marketing didn't give them any leads. And the marketing told me that sales, they didn't know if any of their leads turned into opportunities. And I'm like, you guys are grown-ups. You are grown men, like cross the aisle, talk to each other. If you're not, and it just the fact that hadn't occurred to them to collaborate and give feedback. I mean, clearly more underlying issues there, but at the end of the day, like you both hopefully have the goal of driving more revenue for the company, and therefore you need to work together to get there.
That's not necessarily true, though. They don't necessarily share those common goals.
And then that's the bigger underlying issues of the top down. Yes, exactly. That when that is the case, that needs to be solved first.
And sometimes, as a casual bystander, you hear some crazy things. So here's a crazy thing I heard at Oracle, and I won't mention the company. It was Oracle. I was a subject matter expert in driving new business development for the autonomous data warehouse, which had just been introduced. And we were looking to expose our customers, our existing Oracle customers, to that new platform. And so someone in field marketing came up with a great idea to make sure that we got butts and seats at webinars to offer free certification. You come to the webinar, we're going to certify you that you are now authorized to operate our autonomous data warehouse. And so I said to the field marketing team, so you're certifying people to run something that runs by itself. So one, that's not necessarily of value to them. And two, it might be good material for our competition to use. This autonomous data warehouse is not so autonomous. They dropped that idea. And it was indeed autonomous. It took 4 buttons to get a cloud-based data warehouse up and running. And we did not want to break that positioning. But you hear these crazy things because the field marketing team was measured on butts and seats. They were not measured on net new revenue. And so, at the top level of the organization, the head of marketing, is measured at similar goals. But you work down and, you get into the levels where people are making day-to-day decisions. There isn't necessarily that same alignment. It's up to us who see these things, right? We have to break that shit.
Well, you remind me of a story earlier in my career, about 10 years ago, I was, trying to strengthen our business development team and go-to-market strategy, and was talking with the head of it wasn't called customer success, but accounts, whatever. And I was like, I need to get more insight from your practice, your subject matter experts. I need more, to understand more of what they're, in general, what are their best practices? What are they're the subject matter experts, and that's going to help us. And he said to me, sales and customer success are always going to butt heads, and you're a Pollyanna for thinking otherwise. And I remember just being, first of all, Pollyanna, whole other issue. I'm like, but don't you realize, if I can't sell more, they won't have jobs? It was just to me baffling. Are you not seeing the end connection of more sales equals more jobs and more career trajectory and security for them? No, it just was not. Anyway, that luckily I was able to prevail regardless. But it's if you don't see the connection between what you do and what your team does to the greater good of the company, to your point, it's not just hitting a number of butts and seats, it's what actually ties to the North Star. And I think it goes back to you all need to be paddling in the same direction and making sure. And I use that analogy all the time.
Will it make the boat go faster? Yep,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Perfect. But I use that analogy all the time because it's real. If you don't have the same North Star that you're all paddling towards, that's a real issue.
Wait, you just did a book report on will it make the boat go faster?
I did. Yeah. It's osmosis just by seeing it. So.
Exactly. We'll get to the jolt effect in a minute. So customer success, what a fascinating role. I became good friends with my customer success manager on the Xerox account many years ago. She was the glue that held 35 people together. She and the key account director, Jamie, who was fabulous. Jamie was a great leader for the team. Jane was a fabulous customer success manager. She knew where all the bodies were buried. She had a very tight relationship with all of the key decision makers, all of the next couple of tiers down. Whenever we got together to do key account planning, If she wasn't there, I would cancel the meeting because she had the inside scoop. Our customers, the 500 or so people that Oracle touched at Xerox, all trusted her and they trusted Jamie and they put up with the rest of us. And I just had Jane on the podcast recently. We talked about customer success, and I've had a couple of other CSMs on as well. It's a difficult role and it's collapsing. 10 years ago or so, CSM started getting quotas, renewal quotas, and it's changed. And I hear that even at companies as large as IBM, and I'm using them as an example, I don't have any inside information, that CSMs are now carrying more accounts. You can't carry 5 large accounts as a CSM. You have to be completely embedded in 1 or maybe 2 so that you can build deep relationships. And it's that deep relationship building that drives future engagement, future time and access, future opportunity, future revenue. And cutting $300,000 fully loaded person to save that money, you're walking away from millions of dollars in revenue and handing that business to competitors. Kerry, we're not going to do that in our new co.
The one that's on the private island.
That's right. Exactly. What else do you want to talk about? What else is on your mind? What are we going to cover at our next? Do we have an offsite if we're on our island?
Yes. We'll fly people in on our private jet.
So instead of an offsite, we're going to have an offshore. We're going to get a bunch of floaties, those big island floating things. And
yes, yeah. The ones that have drink holders. Yep.
Exactly. Some iced drinks. Someone will take notes. So what are we going to talk about at that offshore?
Yeah. So, one thing, and Lee, I'd asked you about earlier is I've been having a lot of conversations with business leaders that are looking for sales leadership. And in those conversations, it comes back over time and time again. They keep asking, but what people do you already know that you can bring in to our pipeline? But who do you already know? But can you just send us leads? And, even as a consultant, I would get that of more than once. They tell me all their problems. And I said, that great, done that, fixed that for other people. This is how, let me help you. And then they come back, yeah, can you just send us leads? And the thing is that first and foremost, it drives me crazy from a personal perspective because I'm like, I am more than my Rolodex. Like I'm more than my LinkedIn, network.
My Rolodex is not for sale.
Not for sale. Number one. Number two, especially as a consultant. Number two, first of all, who's your target audience? It goes back to if you sell to everyone, that's not going to help move your dial. Even if I know if enough people meet your ICP to fill your pipeline today, that's not going to help you 6 months from now. That's not going to help you 12 months from now. And then number three, if I'm just bringing them in because they know me, they're doing me a favor. If they're not in market, it's a waste of everyone's time because then I've had this and I, stopped doing it from a consulting perspective because people would say, I'm not in market for that. But I'll take the meeting, as a favor to you. And I'm like, absolutely not. We're not wasting time.
That's a withdrawal from your relationship bank account with them.
That's the other thing, right? There's only so many times you can ask them. And so I think it goes back to please don't ever ask just for leads. Don't ask someone just who do you know, especially because if you're going to hire someone for who they know versus how they're going to fix your process, again, it's going to lead to a dead end. So there's so many more things that go into driving sustainable, scalable growth through, expanded customer lifetime value than my Rolodex. And it's insulting to ask me that for many reasons. So that's, the big one thing that's been top of mind because it just happens over and over and over again.
Tell them to stop that. Okay, here it is. Stop that. Kerry has process expertise, significant process expertise. There's this old saw about the plumber who gets brought into a manufacturing company. They've been having a problem that just process manufacturing, something's not working. The production lines have been shut down. So this plumber comes in, he walks around for a while. He goes, I think I know the problem. Well, do you know how to fix it? Do you know how to fix it? Yeah, I know how to fix it. It's going to be $300,000. And they go, well, whatever. It's costing us $1 million an hour to be offline. Okay. Great. How long will it take? Not long. So the plumber reaches into his bag. He pulls out a hammer. He taps once on a pipe. Production line starts right back up. Customer says, well, we're not paying you $300,000 for that. Well, did you know where to tap? Did you know how to tap? You paid for my 40 years of expertise in solving the problem, not the tap of the hammer. And so asking you for leads is asking you to tap a hammer somewhere. Asking you to solve the problem is leveraging your years of expertise. You're still a youngin', so I won't suggest how many years. It's the expertise. So I think we've come to a good place. We've hit on some key topics, key takeaways. One, I love your approach of interviewing customers to understand their careabouts, to understand their perspective of the impact on their business, as opposed to going into product development saying, so what problems do we solve for customers? It's what the customers believe that matters. Leveraging that in marketing and making sure that the sales teams have that same knowledge and can put it to use in conversations. Second, you mentioned trust between an organization and an individual salesperson and the customer. And trust takes a long time to build and very quickly can be stolen. And then the third is that process standpoint of building something that is sustainable and scalable, because otherwise you don't have a business, you have a hobby.
Agreed, Lee. Agreed.
Kerry, where can people find you?
Great question. So my podcast is Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, and you can search in any of your favorite podcast directories. And I'm also on LinkedIn, and you can find my company website, my consultancy at revenuebasedmarketing.com.
Nice. Any final words for the listeners?
Yeah, no, I think it's just integrate your marketing, sales, and customer success first and foremost, and towards that same North Star. They all need to be paddling in that same direction to the same North Star.
Right. And hire an expert with that process expertise who knows where to tap.
Not the biggest Rolodex.
Thanks, Kerry. This has been wonderful, as always.
Thanks, Lee. Always. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.